and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be checking out one of, if not my all-time favourite fuzz pedal. I am of course talking about the Electro-harmonix Russian Big Muff Reissue. Now I'm sure the Big Muff is a pedal that almost all of you will be familiar with, but this specific one here is the Russian Reissue, which I believe is based on Big Muff Revision 7, also known as the Green Russians, which were coming out of the Sovtek Russian factory in the mid-90s. If you want to know more about the Russian era of Big Muffs, then make sure you check out my video where I go through the whole history of them and go through more of the specific revisions. But today we're looking at the reissue, and like I said, this is probably one of, if not my favourite fuzzes of all time, and it certainly is my favourite of all the Big Muffs. The Russian Muffs are known for having a bit less of a mid-scoop and a bit more bass in them, but the reason I like it, to me at least, is because of all of the Muffs it's probably the most distortion-like and feels the most natural to me, especially when you're sort of trying to put it into a mix. But let's hear how it sounds. So today I am playing a Gretsch G2655 with upgraded Filtertron style humbuckers, and that is going through the Russian Big Muff and into a Vox AC15, which on a clean tone sounds something like this. And then if we kick in the Big Muff, it sounds something like that. So that's a typical sort of tone that I would use for this pedal. As you can see, that's what the settings are on. But let's talk about these controls. So it's a 3-knob fuzz. You've got a volume, a sustain, and a tone control. Volume and tone are pretty self-explanatory. Sustain maybe less so, but it's a thing across all of the Big Muffs, and sustain is what controls your amount of fuzz or your gain. So I'm going to leave the volume where it is, but let's first have a look at the tone control and see what range of fuzz we can get out of this. So far, and where I normally run it, is about 12 o'clock, but let's put it all the way down and see what that sounds like. And then if I hold a chord and sweep all the way through the pot, so as you can see, there's a really good range of tones in that tone control, and it goes from everything from sort of a dull, very woolly fuzz all the way to quite searing and harsh. Like I said, I like to keep it around 12 o'clock, so we'll leave it there and then we'll have a look at the sustain control, which is the amount of fuzz. So if we back it off all the way, it does go almost all the way off and just gives you a tiny bit of grit, bumping it up to about 9 o'clock. And then up to 12 o'clock. And then pushing all the way up to 3 o'clock. All the way maxing it out. So as you can hear, especially when you get into those higher territories, it makes sense why they put sustain on the control, because you do start to get quite a lot of compression in that, and it does sustain for a good long time. Now, as you might have noticed on the pedal cam, I find this pedal to be very loud in terms of volume, hence why I'm only running it at about 9 o'clock. And I do find that you can quite easily overwhelm an amp if you turn up that volume too high. With the amount of distortion that you tend to already get coming out of this pedal, it doesn't tend to play nice with then more gain from the preamp of whatever amp you're running into. On the flip side of that, however, this pedal does play a lot nicer to something like a tube screamer pushing the front end of it, especially when you compare it to a fuzz pedal with a lower number of transistors and a much more simple circuit, like something like a tone bender or a fuzz face, for example. And also, unlike those pedals, it's also much happier being anywhere on your pedal board, and it doesn't demand to be the first thing in your signal chain. But I don't think there's a whole lot more to say on this pedal than that. It's a fairly straightforward fuzz pedal. You're all going to be familiar with the Big Muff, and it's got some absolutely killer tones in it. I know for a fact this one's going to be remaining on my board for a good long time. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments and tell me what your favourite version of the Big Muff is. And if you would like to know more about the Russian one specifically, then like I said, make sure you go and check out my video on them, because it's a really interesting watch, although it does get a tad nerdy. But that's all from me for today. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.